Our first panelist is the Dean of the University of Cebu, Dean Al-Shwaid Ismael. Our second panelist is Associate Dean Vergenee Marree Abrenica-Orillosa of the Ateneo de Naga University. And lastly, we have Dean Arlene Cosape, the Dean of the University of Southeastern Philippines.
Hello. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to our audience here in the UP, of the University of the Philippines, DGC campus, a wonderful campus, and also to our friends who are with us via Zoom and also watching the live stream. So again, good morning. We will begin day 2 with a very interesting panel, and a panel that I am very familiar with because we were part of the EduTech Asia conference, of which we will be sharing a lot of insights, hopefully, about. So just to give you a brief background, EduTech Asia conference is the biggest gathering of educators and enthusiasts who are working on the field of education technology, basically looking at how technology affects, impacts, and perhaps even improves education and learning across Asia. And during this conference, in Singapore, early in November this year, we were able to meet not just higher education educators, but also those coming from the basic education and also from tech companies who are gathering and showing off how they see or how it is already now in the field of edutech and how they see the future as well. So with me in this panel is, as introduced, deans and faculty. Let me just give you an additional insight or background from where they are. We have, for example, Attorney Ini, who is from the Ateneo de Naga University. You met Dean Nina yesterday. And although they're a young law school, they have done lots of innovations, particularly in meeting the challenges of the pandemic. You've seen what they were able to accomplish in their law clinic. And I feel like because of their situation in Bicol region, facing typhoons and even conflict concerns, they are interested in improving education and the way that they teach. We also have Dean Arlene Cosape, who's from Davao City. Their school is definitely new. They'll be having their first batch of bar takers next year. So as a school, they're a great believer in outcomes-based education, and they're infusing this in law education as well, as they work on important issues in their community, such as indigenous people's concerns as well as the environment. And finally, we have the University of Cebu, a much more established law school and one of the top performing in the country when it comes to the bar exams. They're a great believer as well in digitalization, as they are pioneers in the localization and digitalization of the bar exam. So definitely great perspectives coming in. But for today, let's focus as well on our experiences in EduTech. And I'm sure our audience members are also interested to know more about that. Dean Shwaid, I believe you can share to us a little bit more background introduction on the conference.
Thank you, Attorney Aaron. Maayong buntag kaninyong tanan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. You're right, Attorney Aaron. We're here to share our learnings or the things that we learned from the EduTech Asia conference last November 9 to 11. This is supposed to be a casual conversation, right? We want everyone to understand that we're here to share our learnings and not like a reporting, or we want everyone to feel comfortable and start with an open mind. As we told ourselves when we went to Singapore last November, when we attend the conference, we need to keep an open mind and we need to entertain the idea of embracing a culture of innovation and embracing digital transformation. And it is also important that we understand that there's a difference between innovation and technology. Innovation is the way how you do things differently. And as you enter the hallway, if you were keenly observing, there's a question posed on the wall. It says, what can we do differently in terms of what we teach and how we teach? So this morning, we'll share with you some snippets of the things that we observed during the EduTech Asia conference. Hopefully that can help you in when you go back to your home provinces and teach law. And for this morning, we'll also help you appreciate the beauty of technology, how it can supplement or even make teaching law fun and easier, and also how to convince our professors, especially the senior professors, on how to teach law using technology. And in the end, will help you also appreciate that we are actually ready. In response to the question yesterday that somebody asked, are we ready? We talked about digital transformation. I think we are. And even if we're not, I think we don't have a choice, but we need to make ourselves ready, because, I mean, it's not only because we have available technologies, but we are dealing with the different generations, students coming from different generations. And one way to be able to bridge the gap between professors who come from earlier generations and the millennials and Gen Z, by the way, the first batch of Gen Z will graduate this year, is for us to know how, for us to understand their language and how they do things and how they do things differently, right? And that's when we try to innovate.
Yeah, thank you, Dean Shade. I think that's one of the most important, if not under asked questions in law school. Do we even recognize that usually people on the podium are of a different generation than those listening? And the technologies and methods that sometimes we do use are quite dated, or at least come from a very rich tradition that perhaps doesn't really recognize that difference. Attorney Ini, I'd like to know more about your insights in how tech is supposed to connect, the learners in the classroom with the teachers or the educators.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll have a little bit of sharing with you. Can we have it on screen?
Apologies.
So we'll share with you a framework of one of the topics in the conference that was presented to us. This is the framework of what you call the School of Humanity. So if you have your internet connection or your data, you can just look for it. It's a School of Humanity. So this was an innovative way of building a school where you don't have a campus, you don't have a physical structure, where you don't have teachers and students with each other. Okay, so so if you look for it online, okay, the School of Humanity talks about human beings wanting to learn and human beings wanting to teach, but not seeing each other. And how do you do that? Okay, so we're catching that thought, and Law School of Humanity. Okay, so this is a sharing from the School of Humanity. We took some photos of their slides, and we want to share to you the actual photos that we had so that you can have a feel of how they presented it. Okay, so the School of Humanity presented it in a way that let us reinvent schools. That was their opening. Let's reinvent schools. And so, coming from a legal education team, how do we reinvent law schools and reinvent law professors? So it's really like a practical vision for the future. The School of Humanity have students from all over the world, most of them from conflict areas. Okay, so were able to graduate high school students, those who want to learn but couldn't go to school in conflict areas. So they offered online learning platform for these students who are even banned from studying. So the first question is, what if we really start from scratch? So can you imagine, law deans, administrators, professors, imagine, I want to have a law school, I want to start from scratch. I don't want to have a model of this school or this school. I want to start from scratch. So that was the opening. Imagine if you can start your own school and start it from scratch. How do you want it to be? What kind of school do you want it to be? So that's their imagination. So the instructors of that School of Humanity are young people. They have students who also said, this is what I want to learn. So it's the reverse. So their students will tell them, I want to study robotics. And so if you want to do robotics, this is the program, the courses that you will take. They will not take any more poetry. They will not take any more literature. The fundamentals they'll take, but you cater to your own path. You program your own curriculum. So that was the imagination that was given to us. Okay. Next. Another one is the first principles thinking. Okay. So go back to the first principle all the time. So this caught me, like in class, I always say, this is so fundamental. You should know this. Fundamental principles in law, right? So fundamental principles build, one principle build from another fundamental principle. So that was the first, that's another sharing, first principles thinking. So what are the first principles in education? So we'll be sharing to you 4 that we think are relevant. They shared so many, but we'll be sharing to you 4, okay? So what could first principles thinking be in law education? Principle 1, connect those who want to learn with those who want to teach. So many people would want to become lawyers, and so many also would want to become law professors, and we need to connect them. We need to connect our learners with the educators. And how do we do that? Okay. This is so personal to me, and it struck me the most because I was born from the Visayas. I'm also from Cebu. But my parents sent me to Manila to study because they said it's best education is given in Manila. So we had to migrate to Manila. And then now I find myself teaching in a regional school. Pre-pandemic in Camarines Sur, it's Southern Luzon. Pre-pandemic, I travel every single week taking the bus, going to Bicol region. Why? Because I feel that there's meaning more in, I don't say there's no meaning in teaching in Manila, but the resources there are very few. This law school was young. There were so many few resources, few professors who were willing to, teach law in a different way. So the vision for the law school was different. It was very, very young. And so I had to travel every single week. The inspiration really were my students. Okay, they were so encouraged to come to class because I traveled all the way from Manila. I just go to attending class, so they cannot be absent. And because of the pandemic, I didn't have to travel. And I was so worried. How learning never stops. That's what I told my students. Even in times of crisis, learning never stops. If you don't want to learn in a time of crisis, it's going to be problematic. It's a good thing we had online learning, right? Virtual learning was there. And so now we can do hybrid. I can travel not every single week and maybe every 2 to 3 weeks, and I see them face to face, and then I see them online. Okay, so I realized, there's no boundary in teaching law. There's no boundary in learning law. And today, Dean Arlene and I were talking about how about our students from Southern Luzon meeting with your students from Mindanao in one class, in an online class, right? And interact, right? Let's connect them because we're not supposed to be, regionalized in thinking. They can share, they can mingle, they can exchange their ideas. And so technology really opens us to connect to each other. So many of our learners are from all over. Many of our educators are from all over. So we have a problem of educators not willing to innovate or willing to improve. But we have also not tapped other resources who know technology, right? Who are willing to learn, then we can tap them. So that's really this is one thing. The first principle really struck me first in that context.
Wow, thank you, Attorney Ini. I wanted to know more about technology, but somehow we talked about a more basic principle about connecting human beings. And I do remember in that conference, one of my takeaways was technology is not about technology, it's about us. Human beings interacting in an educational setting, but obviously as schools, we also want to develop more than just their minds. So thank you for your sharing. I mean, It's really remarkable to come from that perspective. But if we are talking about technology enabling us to connect, in an educational setting, I'm sure there's still a particular approach, right, to education. It's not just about social connections, it's just about interactions. Dean Shwaid, maybe you can talk to us more about the principle of teaching how to teach human beings.
Sure, Attorney Aaron. Next slide, please. So I'll share with you now the second principle. So just for the information of everyone, when we attended the Asia conference, the EduTech Asia conference, it wasn't presented this way. So we came up with these three principles based on how we understood all the small sessions that we attended, and also based on our realization. The second principle talks about how do we teach as human beings. Sometimes, especially at the time of the pandemic, deans were more concerned about being able to deliver legal education despite the effects of the unprecedented COVID-19. Sometimes deans were actually pressured on how to meet the requirements of the school in terms of enrollment, in terms of faculty providing the completing the courses despite the constraints. But I think we need to take a step back, and like what I said earlier, we need to keep an open mind. We need to, and I speak from the perspective of a dean, I always tell my professors that, law school evolves, everything around us evolves, and we need to evolve as well. Our students come from a different generation. So the first thing that we need to do is to know what are our resources, to know who are within our environment and how we address those factors. So one important consideration under this principle is workforce skills assessment. And I would say that this is not only applicable because there's pandemic, but in fact, even before, this should have been done. First, workforce skills assessment. As a dean, you need to understand the capabilities of your professors. You also need to understand the profile of your students. And if I may just share, although we have a screening process, but in the end, I do the final interview because I need to know who my students are. I mean, we're not really a big law school. Our enrollment is just between 100 to 200 first-year students. So I make sure that I conduct the interview, and it's my way of knowing who my students are so that I can address their needs. I can see who have potentials and those who do not have, but have, but can be helped. And at the time of the pandemic, I realized that when I attended this EduTech Asia conference, I was actually doing it already. When the pandemic hit, the first thing that I did was to assess, okay, how many senior professors do I have who are technologically handicapped? How many young professors do I have who are actually technologically handicapped? Now, how do we address this situation without causing panic? How do we address this situation without inviting comments from students who, with one wrong decision, would immediately post something on Facebook and bash you? There's a joke. They said that I was appointed dean at the right time, and by the way, I don't have any education background. I became dean overnight for various reasons. I had to learn everything the hard way, and I became dean just 2 semesters before the pandemic hit. And then after a year from the start of the pandemic came the Typhoon Odette. Again, that caused a disruption, and it was even hard because we were not dealing only with the virus. We were not only dealing with the problems of how to complete or finish final examinations, but how do we deliver our obligation to the Supreme Court, because we were one of the hosts during the 2020-2021 bar examinations. So you need to assess your workforce. You need to capacitate your professors. You also need to capacitate your staff. I know that we all have different circumstances. I know that some law schools are blessed with an assistant dean, with a lot of staff. I don't have an assistant dean, but I think I'm blessed with 7 staff. For those who have limited resources, there are various ways to address that. We just need to be creative. And Next is we need to train and prepare our law educators for technology innovation. So if I may just share, even before the pandemic, I was pushing for innovation. You know, somebody who's fresh from the US, finishing his LLM, who was able to see a lot of things happening, new things that were not being done here in the Philippines. So I was so idealistic. But then when I pushed for innovations initially, I pushed for automation. It was flatly denied because it would cost at least 3 million pesos. And then few months after the pandemic hit, so I was able to tell them, I told you so. And this is actually future-proofing our law school because we don't know what will happen, right? So during the pandemic, we conducted trainings. Of course, we needed to capacitate our professors. We also needed to capacitate our students because they need to learn how to use technology. They need to learn how to use the LMS. So a month after the pandemic hit, we immediately shifted to the use of an LMS. And until this day, we were using this LMS called Schoology. And then we also shifted to the use of exam.net as an alternative because we weren't sure about Google Classroom because there's no way of determining whether it was really the student who was answering. And one realization, and the pandemic also taught me, and the sudden shift to the use of technology also taught me so many things. How creative our students are, how they cheat, and how they cheat in different ways. Unbelievable. And I had to learn that, like do random interviews, check it for myself. And also as dean, I need to show to my faculty and staff and students that I know the technology. Because I think it's easier to convince your professors if you show to them that you know what you're talking about and you know what you're implementing. And then you capacitate them. Next, as an educator, how do I assess my skills in using technology in teaching law? So as dean and as professor, I ask myself, do I have enough knowledge? Should the law school shift to complete use of technology? Or is there a way for me to innovate, make learning of the law fun, and not just to one method that we are all accustomed to, which is Socratic method? And I mean, we all became lawyers, we all became educators, and we only learned one way of teaching law. And we thought that Socratic is the only way to teach law. But apparently there are various ways to teach law, and I will show that later when I tackle active learning. And what am I doing to improve in this area? So as an educator, I did my research. I checked, and more so as dean, I have to do my own research. What are the available tools? How much do they cost? How long does it take them to implement it, assuming that we subscribe? And how long does it take to train people? And then everything's also about timing because you have time constraints. You only have limited time to implement before the next semester starts. And what made it more difficult was the fact that we actually do not know what will happen next. Are we gonna continue using this technology? Or should we wait for another lifting of the quarantine, changing of the quarantine from one classification to another? And I echo what Dean Tin shared yesterday, and I did the same thing, which is issuing guidelines. It was very helpful because it will serve as a roadmap for the professors on what to do during the semester and in the next semester. And like what I said earlier, teaching law is fun. So the past weeks or days, we've been talking about the need to shift, or the need for a change of mindset, the need to shape from being a podium professor to that of being a clinician, or to that of being student-centered. We're in the Socratic method that we're used to, we only know that the professors will assign materials, and then students will attend classes, and then we ask questions. And some professors find it gratifying when some of their students cannot answer their question, which is wrong, right? And also some professors would prefer not to give feedback, right? Because and we thought that it was okay because anyway, that's how we do things. And when they become lawyers, they would do the same. I mean, they will encounter the same thing. But actually, it's not the right way to do it. And Attorney Manjares also shared yesterday this particular slide. It's part of active learning, and it is the reason why there's a need to introduce active learning in legal education. People remember only 10% of what they read. Isn't that what we ask our students to do? Read a lot of cases, assign 30 cases per class, and we thought that it's effective. 20% of what they hear, and that's why we thought that Socratic method is an effective way of teaching law, because they can hear the answers of their classmates. 50% of what they see and hear, 70% of what they say and write, and 90% of what they actually do. And this actually has a connection to the clinical legal education. It's experiential learning. But active learning isn't just about experiential learning. It isn't just about clinical legal education. It's more. There's more to that, because teaching law is fun. And why active learning? It helps promote higher order thinking skills, like the application of knowledge, analysis, and synthesis. And if you were attentively listening to the discussion of Attorney Manharis yesterday, he emphasized several components, things that you would probably consider when you give questions, when you formulate your exam, your assessments. And I also learned this in the Legal Educators Advancement Program certification, right? You need to know whether your question or your assessment actually would test the student's ability to create, to evaluate, to analyze, to apply the concepts, to understand and remember. And we thought that as long as the students remember, it's enough. That's why we ask them to just memorize and parrot what the professors say or what's in the textbook. But apparently, it's not just remembering. It's not just memorization. There are many things there are different skills that we need to develop. And active learning activities engage students in deep rather than surface learning, and would enable students to apply and transfer knowledge better. What is then active learning? Active learning would ask students to be engaged in learning by thinking, by discussing, by investigating, by creating. When you apply active learning in a classroom, students solve problems, analyze, struggle with complex questions, and they help each other to solve those questions instead of just the professor asking questions, and instead of just the students learning everything from the professor. In active learning, the approach is you shift the responsibility to the students for them to know what needs to be learned and how to learn it. And these are just examples of what are active learning strategies. And these are the strategies which I think may be useful to law professors. And I've also tried applying some of them in the classes that I handle. 1 minute paper, one minute paper reflection. It's when you provide students with a question or with a situationer, and then ask them to reflect, and then write their answers, and then submit it to the professor, instead of just asking questions in openly in the classroom. And then reflection or 1 minute paper is useful if prior to that you've done a group project, or students came from an experiential learning exercise, or from a field activity where they need to debrief and reflect on what they learned. Post-it parade is also interesting. It's when you, as a professor, provide a question or an idea or an argument, and then your students will comment. Instead of standing up, if you're in a classroom, in a physical setting, you ask them to write their answers or comments on a post-it, and then place it on the board. Or if it's online, if you're using technology, you can use Blackboard, right? And other walls, online walls where they can, and I think we use it during the LEAP certification program. And then case studies. We thought that, maybe when you saw case studies, the first thing that will come into your mind is, okay, we've been doing that. We've been assigning them cases, right? Hundreds of cases. But there's a different approach. Instead of just assigning to them various cases, you focus on one case, which is very important, or landmark case, or instead try to get an excerpt from one particular case, and then provide it to the students, and then you require them to analyze the problem, analyze the facts, and then submit either a paper or share their inputs in class. Next is for small group. You have case studies, you have post-it parade. Peer review is also unique. I did this in my international business transactions class. I pose a question. I ask two students to share their views. Instead of me talking to the student, student A will engage in a discussion with student B, and they'll discuss it in front of the class. Of course, the professor's role is also crucial because you need to provide guidance, right? And then at the end of the day, at the end of the session, you need to summarize. You need to correct any wrong thoughts or ideas. And then round table, it's the usual round table where you group maybe a small class into 5 per group, and then you assign them either same case or same arguments or same idea, and then you ask them to discuss it, and then ask them to choose one person to share it in class. And then for large group, post-it parade, debates, you are familiar. You have snowball, and then you have fishball. Fishball is quite interesting. It's when you create a small group, require them to, provide them with a question or a case study, allow them to discuss, and then the rest of the students will be from the outside observing. And then after this group will discuss and then share their thoughts to the professors, then they switch. Those who are the group previously outside the fish bowl will now take their place, and then they discuss, and then those who were previously in the fish bowl will now be the observers. And then flip classes. I think some of the professors are doing this. It's when you, and this is very helpful at the height of the pandemic. You provide your students with the material, videos, cases, and then when they come to class, you apply the other active learning strategies. It's not just asking them questions. It's also asking them to share. And some of you might ask, isn't that difficult to do with the use of technology? Well, if you're using, like for example, Zoom, they have breakout session feature, so you can group your students into different breakout sessions. I also did that in my international business transactions class. One of my activities prior to the finals was preliminary rounds for mock negotiation, where I assigned my students actual cases, actual transactions. I'm a transaction lawyer. And then I supervised them. And then for their finals, which is this coming Saturday, it will be a mock negotiation round where I gave them transactions involving mergers and acquisition, involving EPC contracts, engineering, procurement, construction contracts, franchising. And then I asked them to choose at least 5 issues for purposes of the mock negotiation, and then I will supervise them. And I gave them so going back to flip classes, I gave them the materials, and then when they got back, when they joined the class, either online or on-site, they share their comments, thoughts, and ideas. And aside from flip classes, there's also role playing. And the thing is, in UC, I encourage my professors to be creative as long as it's within the as long as it does not violate the policy. I have a high regard. I highly respect my professors' academic freedom. I do not meddle with the way how they teach, as long as at the end of the day, when we evaluate, students actually learn from them. So they do role playing, and of course, my professors will ask me, "Dean, can I do this?" Of course. Can I do this? Can I use this technology? How much does that cost? Okay, go. And then can I use this kind of setup, or can I invite a professor, or can I do team teaching? Can I invite practitioners, actual practitioners, to discuss on very important topics in a particular subject? I would always say no. I would always say yes, as long as it does not violate any policy. So then there are many others. Index card pass. Index card pass is not like the index cards where you call them, right? Instead, you give your students an index card, ask them to write their questions or their comments, and then group them. Then they compare. If they have the same question, they discuss it. Otherwise, they join another group. So it's like you prepare an index card, you pass it to the other group, and the other groups will answer it. Then think, pair, share. buzz group, 1 minute paper reflection, and then practice assessments. So I'm also handling review class, and it's really difficult to finish the coverage if you do Socratic, right? Especially that I'm handling commercial law. So what I do is I do lectures, and every after lecture or every after class, I organize an activity. Could be any of those active learning strategies, or could be like a short quiz, 1, 2 questions. And it also develops their writing ability in preparation for the bar exam. So that's principle 2. Active learning. Definitely teaching law is fun, and teaching law can be taught also with the use of technology.
Thank you. It's okay, Dean. Thank you, Dean. Shwaid, those are wonderful examples, and I feel like there's that discussion not just about technology, but also the approach to teaching. I think Attorney Indi, you also like to share a little bit about your experiences.
Okay, regarding the workforce assessment, it's very, very important also for us to know our students, because Dean Shwaid shared earlier that he's interviewing it. Our dean also said you have to interview your students. And then it is very, very surprising that 20% of our law students come from the engineering, 15% are from the medical and allied sciences, and then about 15% from the business, and then the rest is like the traditional pre-law courses. So if you have professors who are so traditional, like traditional way of teaching, from the sciences and the engineering, they couldn't understand that. So when I discovered that that's the profile of our first year students, I had to tell our professors, we have students who cannot speak straight English in more than 5 minutes because they're IT people. They don't talk, right? IT people, they don't talk. Engineers, they don't talk. So they don't talk more than 5 sentences. So if you keep on asking them texts, they will not answer, right? So that was so challenging for me as a professor at the start, because in Zoom, in face-to-face, they don't talk. But in Zoom, they talk. So they don't talk to me in face-to-face. So face-to-face, I told them right after, why can't you finish like 3 sentences, like 3 straight sentences? Ma'am, that's the only answer. Ma'am. And then in Zoom, after a few weeks, they can already speak. Because it's safe. In the online, it's safe. They can read, actually, they have an answer, they can type, they can read. For me, that's okay. It's communication skills is also learned in law school. So that's it. So the workforce assessment and the students assessment, that's why I share it to the dean, I share it to the staff that we have students who are in this field. It's so difficult to teach them law, which is full text, 600 pages, to people who are into formula, right? And then I tell them, why don't you just go to masters in the medical sciences or what? Why do you want to become lawyers? And they said, yeah, they want to become lawyers. So the future of law will be interdisciplinary, right? So it's going to be interdisciplinary. As law professors, we have to be open to interdisciplinary. So it's no fixed way of teaching law now.
Thank you, Attorney Ini. And if you are wondering why the focus seems to be less on technology per se, it's because I think one of the realizations that we had there is that the pandemic did not cause technology. It did not cause us to subscribe to technology. It hastened it, but the technology is on a pace on its own, right? It is coming. And if we're not ready, then we'll be losing a lot in terms of education, in terms of learning. And when you shared a lot about the different strategies of active learning, Dean Shwaid, I think the focus there is that technology should enhance education. Sure, 2020 and 2021, it was about managing the transition, emergency online learning. But at this point, it's now incumbent on us to think, how do we enhance education? How do we enhance learning with technology? Because as Attorney In also mentioned, it's high time we realize that our students are not just cut and paste, one size fits all. They're different, they're unique, and most importantly, they come from a generation, really, really immersed in technology. while us, we grew up, with less technology in the world. And if we look back to the keynote yesterday about ice, uh, ice collecting being obsolete, ice harvesting being obsolete, you have students being brought up in a world where some of our technologies are already obsolete to them. But that means, Dean Arlene, that means we also have a challenge for our educators, in this new environment. As Dean Shwaid mentioned, we've been brought up as law students and lawyers in a different environment. Don't you think that would be challenging? What do you think law educators should bring with them when they face this new reality?
Thank you, Aaron. First, let me share that I grew up in the generation where the computer was very, very large. And the cell phones were this big, analog. No? So, but one thing that I really learned from the EduTech conference is the FIDS, the feel, imagine, do, and share. This was shared by the School of Humanity, and it was primarily for kids. So we learn really from kids. FIDS. So it's for kids. Feel, imagine, do, and share. So how do we apply that to law school, to legal education? So it's about contextualizing, starting where our students are. No? So particularly in thesis writing or in legal research. So I always, when Dean Shwaid said he wanted to interview because he wanted to know who the students are, it's basically the same. So the first thing we ask is, what are you interested in? Ini and I and Aaron, are in the legal scholarship fellowship. And one thing we learned in advising thesis is do not shoot the students' ideas. So wild ideas are still ideas, and that is what interests your student. So build on that interest. No? So you have to feel. So when I interview, I ask the applicant, why are you enrolling in law school? You're an engineer. You're a med tech, no? You're a physical therapist. Why law school? And so they give the reason. Oh, okay. So that's your motivation. Okay? So feel. Then the function of law is, it is intended for society, right? Law does not exist as black letter only. It has a higher function. According to Prof. Ben, it's legal realism. Law is there because it serves a social function. And for SDGs, we have the rule of law and the role of the legal profession. So I ask my students, okay, so this is your context. You want to study this a topic for your thesis, for your legal research. Why? And often it was because there was an issue. There was a problem. They lost a property, many things. So I asked them, so what do you imagine law should be? What would be the function of law for you? So there goes the imagination. What kind of society do you envision society should be? And what would be your role as a lawyer? No? So yeah, imagination. So I asked the students to imagine an alternative or an alternate world where law can serve as a function. No? And then develop. So if that is your idea of the future, of a vision, then how are you going to achieve that? And once you have developed it, you have the obligation to share it. Because as legal educators, really, it is our duty to generate knowledge and share it. Diba? So that was for kids. So the example given was, there was a group of kinder, right? Kinder students, they were so impressed by the jewelry, plastic jewelry. And they wanted to create that kind of jewelry, and they wanted to exhibit. Imagine, kinder, no? 6, 7 years old. And so their teacher told them, okay, you want to exhibit jewelry? What are you going to do? So first, we have to learn how to make the jewelry. No? So there, instead of giving them a set of curriculum, they were made to design their own curriculum. So in application to law school, particularly in the master's probably, we allowed the students to decide, okay, not all lawyers or not all law students want to go to court and litigate and be subjected to the stress of saying, no, Your Honor, yes, Your Honor. No? They would rather go to the field, go to the community, and engage in alternative dispute resolution processes with the IPs, no? Or help informal settlers settle their dispute with the, I don't know, developer. So not everyone wants to go to the courtroom and practice. So we should be able, the legal education should be able to provide that space, no? Where the student says, I want to learn this. This is the kind of legal practice that I'd like to engage in. And so if that is the case, here is the menu of courses that you can take. If you want to learn that, then you have to learn this, you have to learn this, you have to learn that. So you create the curriculum. There is no set curriculum where you say, for first year law school, you take these subjects. For second year law school, you take these subjects. So imagine, develop your own curriculum. And that's actually active learning because I am learning deliberately. I choose what I learn and I know what I want to get from it. And well, you know, when we are curious, we really learn. And we even do more than what is required of us when we are really curious. And we have to develop or to solve a problem, right? So the curriculum emerges. There is no set curriculum. It doesn't mean, however, that we forget the fundamentals like Ini said. But what about ethics? Of course, ethics should also be there, should always be there. That's a fundamental of legal education, right? Because we need ethical, honest lawyers with integrity, but are also competent, no? Yan. And so when we talk about innovation, they presented two kinds of innovation, the core innovation and the edge innovation. Well, we know that legal education is steeped in tradition, and we can be buried under the tradition. So if it's very difficult, we can probably start with just innovating within the system. We call that core innovation, no? A transformation of existing systems or innovating within the system, within the circle. But if we are brave, we can do edge innovation, no? Creating new systems, innovating outside existing systems. And you know what they say, if you really want to innovate something such that the old really becomes old and obsolete. Right? No choice but to adopt the new one. Okay? And applying that in admissions, because one of the concerns really of a dean is how to admit students. And for those who are not state universities, how to make the law school solvent so that we are not closed by our owners. No? So I learned this in one of the sessions I attended, no? And it struck me because as dean, I just wait for the students to ask. And, inquire. And then I don't do follow-up. I don't even get their numbers. And in that session in EduTech, I learned that you're supposed to be aggressive. When you want to promote your school, get the telephone number, get the email, so that the inquiries are converted into enrollments. So I learned that. So I said, yeah. So from then on, whenever somebody inquires, get the email, get the telephone number, so we can convert that into enrollment. Get us more students. No? And then, the admission process itself requires interview and examination. I learned there also that you can actually gamify. Instead of interviewing the applicants, make them play a game. And the game will tell you what are their aptitude. Would they have the aptitude for becoming lawyers? The game would tell you that. And I share that with our guidance office. I said, you can actually gamify this. So we don't have to interview so much. No? Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Arlene. One thing that I think needs to be highlighted is that as we talk more about innovating, the realization is that innovation doesn't mean more expensive technology. Doesn't mean therefore we have to invest a lot in cutting edge technology and expensive technology. That's an option. But the core really is in innovation, in redesigning, rethinking how we approach the learning of our students, understanding that they come from a different generation, understanding that there's a lot that maybe we are missing. And I think one thing that you highlighted and like to emphasize that eventually they really become the leaders of society. They need not become robots that just spout the law, right? I mean, they just say what the law is. They lead society. So I think law schools have that burden of transforming them as fully developed, ethical, capable leaders and lawyers. Yeah. So, but I'd also like to give an opportunity for you to discuss, Dean Arlene, about systems thinking. Yeah, I think that's also something that is useful in now understanding the role of technology, the role of these things, that we don't need to be pressured to invest heavily per se in technology, but we do need to recognize that we have a duty to innovate.
Thank you. Yesterday, when Tanya opened the conference, she mentioned about the Fury U. Yeah, and it's a change theory actually. And she mentioned that you need to look at the different parts. You need to get different perspectives. It's actually systems thinking, right? So law school or legal education is one big system. So we have the school in the middle. We have the regulators, the legal education board. We have the clients. We have the institutions. So there are a lot of stakeholders. No? So when we talk about changing systems, we need to look at each component. No? So I would say, well, not inutile, but it would be very difficult to talk about changing legal education if we will just focus on the schools and the regulatory system. We also look into the society itself, no? The other stakeholders, the big law firms, the clients particularly, and what we really want our society to be. So in Fury U, you have the U, right? From the top, you have the old, no? You have the old reality or the existing or the current reality. You need to understand that existing reality by diving to the bottom, and it's only in the bottom that you really see what's going on, so that you can achieve the vision, the opposite end of the U, which is the alternate reality that you would like to see. So if at the present, we are at this existing reality, and we envision that opposite end of the U, we need to deep dive to the bottom, look at what's happening there, create the necessary stages to reach that reality, the alternative vision that we want to happen for the legal education. And for that, we have to look at all the stakeholders, including, by the way, the licensing process for which we are preparing our students, and the role of the law school in preparing our students for admission to practice, which does not necessarily mean passing the bar, becoming litigators, because there are other fields of legal practice. But yes, and it would require multiple stakeholders. I think Dean Shwaid would like to talk about stakeholders.
Okay, but I'd like to reserve that toward the end of the discussion, but I think there's another important principle that NE would like to share with everyone.
Can you open up? So we'll share about the third slide first. I shared to you earlier about no boundary, no physical school. Actually, that's the third principle. What's really the real purpose of a school campus? Okay. So imagine during the two-year no face-to-face. So the next time you visit the campus, when I went to Ateneo de Naga, it felt so eerie, right? The first time you go to school, it's so quiet. Where are our students? Actually, the doors weren't opening, the windows, it depreciates actually. That's the first realization. I was able to talk to another administrator. They spent more on repairs in the face-to-face because the buildings weren't used. The computers they bought pre-pandemic weren't not functioning. The printers weren't functioning and all. And so, coming from the EduTech, one learning that was shared there is, if you invest in technology, you invest in facilities, and your educators do not use them, there's no point, right? Technology is meant to be used. So I went to campus, I went to the rooms, and then I told the dean, can I use all the computers? Can I use all of these microphones? Can I use the TV? She said, use it every day, or use. Just use whatever you want, you need to use. And then I realized, if I'm the only one using it and the other faculty members aren't using it, there's no purpose, right? Because your school invested in it. And then I talked to our LMS moderator. Now we're in face-to-face. How many professors are using our LMS? So pre-pandemic, they're using it. Now we're back to face-to-face and hybrid. They're not anymore using it. I admit I seldom use it anymore. I mean, I don't have time to upload all my materials. I don't have time to check everything there. But it's a tool supposedly for our students, right? They can go back. They don't need to ask you. They can monitor. They can refresh their memories there. And so I learned there that technology will never replace great teachers, right? But great teachers technology in the hands of great teachers is transformational. So I realized if I consider myself as a great teacher, I need to use technology to transform people's lives, right? Because I have students who are so into technology. Okay? They're so into it. And then one student of mine even told me, because it's a collaborative, right? One thing we learned from EduTech was collaborative learning. You allow your students to develop their own content. And so now I ask them to prepare their own exams, like that. So every single week I ask them to make their own questions. And at the end of the semester, I'm going to take the exams from their own questions. And so they asked me, Mom, where do we put it? How do we upload it? And I can't answer. Can we use Canva? They kept on giving me so many apps. And then I felt so ashamed because I couldn't speak their own language, right? If that's the case, and I keep on continuing to be that kind of educator, I can't be a great teacher using technology to transform their lives, especially if I have students into the IT, computer, in the med tech, in engineering, right? And if we see a future of legal educators, lawyers who are interdisciplinary, I can't be stuck to where I am today, right? So that's it. So it's a human-centered AI. We shouldn't be afraid of this one. In EduTech, AI, there were robots going around. So many robots going around, so many high screens there. And one thing they told us, you don't need to be overwhelmed. You don't need to buy everything. Just look first for the technology that you have and use them. Make sure that you use them. You don't need to buy. You just need to discover, you need to be aware, but you don't need to buy. And it's human-centered. It shouldn't eat you up, right? So we were asked, is online here to stay or is it going to be face-to-face? And the first principle, again, is connect those who want to learn with those who want to teach. right? So it's will always be there. Okay, that's it. For the third.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Ini. And yeah, and that really emphasizes what we'll be talking about. Technology is not the focus, right? It is a tool that further transforms and enhances education. And I think we touch upon systems thinking approach, but perhaps any of the panel can also delve more on systems thinking.
I first share about systems thinking. So coming from EduTech, okay, so I have notes. I sent it to my dean. Dean, these are my ideas. These are the notes. The first thing I did was to talk to our staff. Okay, the first principle was, okay, whatever you know, whatever technology you have, use it, right? So basic is Google Forms. Basic is Google Forms. You don't need to spend. So I went to our staff. So what do you think? Can we use Google Forms and can we include there all the interview questions already? A sample exam question, a problem question? The first answer was, that's the problem of the IT department. So since there's an IT department who controls all the programs, and then we have to ask permission from that another department. Okay, so can't we do it from our own department? Right? So there's so many people to talk. If we talk about innovation, if we talk about changing the way we do in law school, right? There's so many people at stake. So there, if you want to, for example, introduce pure online learning, we can't just do it without the approval of course, the Legal Education Board, without, of course, the approval of the institution, without the approval of the other departments. And of course, you also have the government to consider, right? So the emphasis there is if you need a systems change, this approach is also in a systems approach. It's a network approach. So collaborate. So we were encouraged there to keep on talking when you go home to your own countries. You keep on opening the discussion about how to use technology if the Philippines can actually be really a techno-centered way of learning. And during that EduTech, there were so many presenters. This was a personal sentiment that I had there. We were a pool of educators participating like you, and we were listening to foreigners telling their experiences. And then I told them, why aren't we on stage? Why aren't you on stage? Why don't you share the Philippine experience, how we survived, how the law education survived the pandemic, right? So maybe next time you can be there as panelists. I told them, don't be just a participant. You go and share what the Philippines is doing in surviving, because with the limited resources that we have, we survive, right? With the limited capacity that we have, we survive. So you better share it to other people. So that's it. That's our parents, our learners. It's a systems approach. We cannot do the change by ourselves, even if we want to, unless everybody is open to the idea.
Yeah, and also from the perspective of the dean, I think the idea of innovation should start with the dean, should come from the dean, because as dean, you're the one who's supposed to discuss it with the administrators, explain it to the other stakeholders, the professors, the students, and also those whom you need to deal with from the other departments, IT, accounting, register. So there's so many things that you need to streamline and coordinate with. So alignment is really important. And if I may just share my personal experience, so at the height of the pandemic, consultation is very effective. It was the best way for me to understand what was going on, how the pandemic has affected my professors and the students, and whether my staff is ready to take on a greater challenge, which is, shift from in-person teaching law to online, and sometimes requiring them to go to office, especially when the government eased the restrictions, despite the risk. So I came to realize that whenever you think of an idea, it's good to think of an idea, and sometimes, and unfortunately, many of us are stuck with ideas because either we lack support from the administration, or sometimes we don't have the support of even our own team. So it's important that you are all aligned and you help them understand why you need to do this. And going back to what I mentioned at the start of this discussion, I think it's about time that we need to embrace, to accept that there's a need to shift from doing things traditionally, and that is by teaching law in person to using technology. It does not mean that you have to do either pure online, or you have to do high flex. In fact, for our school, we are slowly transitioning to full on-site, but that doesn't mean that we'll get rid of technology. Instead, we will use technology to enhance the way we teach law with the use of cameras, projectors, with the use of apps that are and assigning laptops per classroom, per professor, training my staff to learn how to do to work on certain apps and softwares, just to make teaching law fun. And also use of technology is not just about it's not only a way of teaching law in a fun way or easier way, but it also makes and this is always my reason why I'm always pushing for innovation in our law school, because I want I want to make it easy for my professors and for my staff when they teach, when they do things, when they process enrollment, when they submit reports. And my ultimate dream, if I may just share my ultimate dream for my law school and for the universities, time will come where everything it can be automated, where the only time that perhaps a student can go to school is on the first day of class. And I experienced that when I did my LLM abroad. All throughout the process, I was here in the Philippines, and the first time that I went to the school was to get my ID and attend my class. And with that kind of, and my staff can work remotely, or they don't really have to be in the office all the time. And that can also make my job easier, right, as dean. And there's a selfish reason for that as well. I mean, let's admit it. I think most, if not all, of the deans are part-time. I'm part-time. I'm only required to be in school in a certain number of days in a week. But then I have to find ways on how I can manage my law school remotely and still, get things running, even if I don't have to over the way how my staff do their job. So right now, if I may just share, our law school installed CCTV cameras, projectors, and in the delivery of legal education, I encourage my professors to use apps, and also to find ways to innovate and vary the way Socratic method is being applied in law school. And of course, like what Dean Arlene shared earlier, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. I hope you learned from our insights, and we are ready to answer questions.
Okay. Okay. So maybe to conclude this discussion, if there are no questions, maybe Dean Arlene also like to share some final words.
Yeah, with everything that we have heard, from our panel, I would say that one very concrete way to do that is to make your course syllabus. Because your course syllabus is really your plan for the entire semester. And if you have your course syllabus, you know when you can use technology, you know when you can do face-to-face, you know the kind of assessments you'll make, you know the kind of knowledge, skill, value that you'd like to test, and you know exactly how many hours to provide for this topic, how many questions to ask to assess this competence. So the core syllabus is very core in delivering a quality legal education. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Arlene. Okay, so you've heard the insights of our three, I think, transform individuals, deans, faculty from their experience in EduTech Asia. And I think one thing that I could share to conclude this discussion is that sometimes it's not just about technology. The really scary part is the change. And any change definitely is scary. You don't really know if it succeeds or not, or if it will succeed or not. But I think the point really is we don't just have to focus on whether things are broken before we change them. Sometimes changing means things also means improving on them. And I think everybody agrees we need to improve more in legal education. So thank you very much to everyone for listening. If you want to talk to our panelists after this, please do. So thank you very much and congratulations.